Hey, welcome back to Me Being Cheap. Today I'd like to talk about influential books along my debt-free journey. So I have several that I'm going to talk about. Now, for those of you that are a little bit younger than me, you may not be aware of the first books I'm going to talk about. If you're my age or a little bit older, you may be somewhat familiar with them. They came out in the 1990s. And it is the Tightwad Gazette. They have Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. And then when it was all said and done, they put all three volumes together into one big book. I don't know if these are still in print. I'm guessing probably they are. They were fairly popular for quite some time. And the way this got started, now think back to the 90s. This was before internet, before blogs, before YouTube. This lady, and her name is Amy Decision, she had started a newsletter on being thrifty. And in one of these books, she talks about how she actually typed out the letters by hand, ran them through on a second-hand copy machine, did the mailing and everything herself. And I believe back in the day, she'd actually became a millionaire doing that. Her dream was to be able to stay at home, have a big farmhouse up in New England, and I believe she had a large family. I'm thinking the number of six kids stands out. So these books are actually compilations of the newsletters that she sent out. Now, some of the information is tips that her readers sent in, and then some of it is actually studies and things that she has done on her own, and she would do like cost analysis. And so if you're familiar with these books, you probably know some of the videos that I have done kind of sound familiar to some of this, because I had learned how to do that years ago from reading these books. So one of the things that she talks about in these books is to have like a price book or a price diary of ingredients or commonly bought groceries, so that you know when they're truly on sale and if that would be a good time to stock up. And so I think I had a recent video where I was talking about how my app that I had on my phone had erased my data, so I lost all my cost comparisons, but I had a lot of it stored up in my brain. But I've actually reverted back to just doing an old-fashioned pen and paper. So I learned that years ago just by reading these books. Now, knowing the timing of these books, so that would have been in the 90s, some of the things in here are kind of funny because they're not around today, but the concept is still the same. So, for example, there was in one of the books, it was talking about what to do with your gummy whiteout, your whiteout that's gone crusty. Well, nobody really uses whiteout these days because most of us do our word processing on a computer, and we may or may not even print it out at this point. Most of what we do is digital. But back in the day, when these books were written, we were still using typewriters. And the whiteout is also called correction fluid. It wasn't cheap, and it wasn't something that you used a lot of all the time, but the bottles tended to go crusty. So, I mean, she had thought of all kinds of things. So some of the data might be a little bit outdated as far as the figures that she gives, like if she does like a cost analysis of how to buy your coffee, for example, or how to buy your popcorn. Those numbers may be a little bit outdated, but the concept is still the same. So for any of you starting to get started in a frugal or tightwad type of lifestyle, trying to make things last longer, get out of debt, that sort of thing, I highly recommend these books. And I did see this available at a library one time, so you could probably even just check the book out at the library. But there are many things in here. I mean, she even developed a recipe to use up ingredients. It was like a standard recipe, so you like this much grain, this much wet ingredient, this much fruit or what have you, and it was a muffin ingredient. And basically it allowed you to make muffins out of things that would normally get left over or thrown out in your fridge. So lots of good information in here, lots of cost analysis. And really what she does is she kind of challenges your way of thinking and maybe how to think of things a little bit differently. So I just picked this up, and it's probably been, I don't know, probably 10 years since I've even looked at these books. But there was one of them, and it was talking about how to deal with designer clothes and kids wanting designer clothes. And so one of the suggestions was give them the budget of what you would have paid for the generic clothes, and then give them work to do to earn the money for the difference if they're wanting designer clothes. So that was one suggestion. Another suggestion was to form a parents group saying, hey, we're not going to support this sort of thing. That's interesting. I would have never thought of that. The third suggestion was to save the label out of designer clothes and sew it into another item that you picked up, like a generic. I don't know. I don't have that much time on my hands, and for me, in my situation right now, my kids aren't that picky, and they like to shop at Goodwill, and they're usually happy when I pick up secondhand or hand-me-downs from cousins or what I buy on clearance. So I very rarely buy new clothes, and you know, and if I do buy new clothes, they're on clearance. So lots of good information in these books. So again, it's the Tightwad Gazette, and it's by Amy Decision. And funny, I never knew how to pronounce her name until the internet came out, and I was watching some YouTube videos. And of course, she's kind of retired, you know, but there was like a newscaster that was referencing and had her name. So I was like, oh, that's how it's pronounced. So these books set the stage for my frugal lifestyle. Now, the other book that I found, and I wish I would have found it a long time ago because it would have been so helpful, and that is Dave Ramsey's The Total Money Makeover. And I found this book, it was several years ago. We were reading it in Sunday school, actually. And it's a very good book, and it tells you the basics of budgeting and why some of the decisions we have made in the past are not the best decisions, and why those decisions, if you continue to make them, will always keep you in debt. And this was some knowledge I did not have, and I really wish I would have had that even as early as a teenager. Because now my parents, they were always well-intentioned, but when I got old enough and I had saved up money for a car and was working a job, I got signed up for a loan in the name of, oh, you've got to build credit now that you're going to be an adult. And I don't even think I was an adult when I got this, because I think my dad was a co-signer on the loan. But in all actuality, I had enough money in the account. I could have paid cash for the car. It wasn't a very expensive one, but I still got signed up for a loan. And then as I moved off to college, that money that I had in the account, it got used for other things like paying for college. It would have been better if I would have just paid the car off. I would have, you know, saved money on interest, and I would have just had the paid for car. Now, on the subject of paying for college, my first year of college down in Arkansas, it was completely free because I had a high enough ACT score where I qualified for a free scholarship. Now, what happened is I got married and moved up to Kansas because my then husband was wanting to study aerospace engineering. And they had told us a couple things. We were young, we were dumb, we didn't get it in writing, we didn't even think it was going to work out that way. But we had actually picked Wichita because he had a grandmother that was getting elderly, needed some help around the house. and we were going to be able to help take care of her in exchange for free rent. And so the college was like, yeah, that's okay. You're moving up here with family. Your tuition will be in state. Well, we get up here and it wasn't. And the out-of-state tuition was crazy expensive. And so we immediately signed up for all kinds of student loans. The both of us did. And what should have happened, if I knew this and if I knew it then, I should have stopped going to school for about a year and established the residency. So after a year, we actually did establish residency, but we still had all those student loans that were encumbered that first year. So had I known then what I know now, I would have just stopped college for a year, worked, saved up money, gotten a full-time job, saved up money, and then resumed my studies the following year. I did not know that was an option. I thought once you started college, you had to stay no matter what, or you would never finish. So it's just some information that if we impart this knowledge or wisdom to our kids and raise them, and as they get older, they understand these things, I think it's going to position them to be more successful as adults. And I sure wish I would have had the knowledge early on. Now, I went looking for my copy of the Total Money Makeover last night, and I can't find it anywhere, which makes me think I probably loaned it out to somebody. I have been known to do that. And in fact, one year, Dave Ramsey, he had put the books on sale for like next to nothing, and like next to nothing on the shipping. And I had actually ordered 10 copies of that, and then I asked on Facebook, does anybody want a copy? I'll give it to you. No strings attached, and I'll even mail it to you. So I did that, and I got rid of 10 copies of the Total Money Makeover. But I can't find my original one, so if I've loaned it to you, I might like it back. It did have some of the notes of my journey along the way. But that is a very good book. I recommend that you read that one. It's going to teach you the basics of budgeting and what to do and what not to do, and if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, how to stop that and redirect your attention and your behavior and get on the right path. Now, his concept that he teaches are the baby steps. And so like baby step 1 is to save up $1,000 for your emergency fund. Anything else that you have in saving, except retirement, everything else above that, you need to pay down on your debt. And that is step 2. You pay down all your debts. You make the minimum payments on all your debts, and then anything extra you pay on the smallest debt that you have. And then once that smallest debt is paid off, then you take that payment that you were making on the smallest debt and add that to the next smallest debt, and that's called your debt snowball. And so you work that. So I've already done all that. And then step 3 is to save fully funded emergency fund, and that's 3 to 6 months of living expenses. And I tend to err on the side of caution because I am a single mom, and so I have a 6 months emergency fund. So in case I get sick, get in a car crash, get fired, anything like that, I should be okay for 6 months to cover my basic living expenses. Let's see, and then after that, you're supposed to invest in retirement at 15%, fund your kids' college. So I have a $529 for each one of my kids that I make a monthly contribution to, and then I am also paying down on my mortgage, which is, I don't know if that's picking up my little debt thermometer there. And I'm hoping to get that paid off, in 3.5 years. But it's a really great system. So I encourage you, read Dave Ramsey's The Total Money Makeover. Well-written book, easy to read while you're reading it. A lot of times you don't want to put it down. So it's actually entertaining. It's insightful and it's entertaining. The next, I would recommend reading the Tightwad Gazette. That's going to give you inspiration for leading a more frugal life, which will help you save money. So these are my favorite books, most inspirational along my journey. All right, thanks for watching. Have a nice day.